Student leaders from Taiwan Sunflower Movement face prosecution, and Malaysian opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim loses his appeal. Plus, Japan expands its aid offerings and justice for a tortured maid. For Wednesday, February 11, 2015, this is the Asia Brief. Taiwanese prosecutors have filed charges against those who participated in a student-led pro-democracy movement called the Sunflower Movement that occupied Taiwan's legislature for weeks last year. State media says 118 people were charged Tuesday with crimes including trespassing, obstruction of official business, and instigating others to commit a crime. Among those charged were student leaders Lin Fei Fan and Chen Wei Ting, as well as researcher and university professor Huang Ko Chang. The protesters last March stormed the legislature and held a 23-day sit-in there to demand the government scrap a trade deal with China, but eventually pulled back after the government promised to review the bill and provide greater transparency on its dealings with Beijing. Malaysia's highest court has upheld a sodomy conviction against Malaysian opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim, rejecting a final appeal in a case dating back almost 7 years. Rights groups say the verdict appeared to be politically motivated, with Anwar facing a 5-year jail term. "See you in some years," he said, as he waved to the public gallery after hugging his family, who burst into tears upon hearing the verdict. Federal court judge Afrin Zakat, who read the verdict over almost 2 hours, said there was overwhelming evidence that Anwar had sodomized an aide in 2008. Anwar was actually once found innocent of these charges. In 2012, a high court had raised questions over evidence in the case when it acquitted him. Tuesday's federal court ruling overturns that judgment, sending the 67-year-old politician to prison. Human rights and opposition groups criticized the verdict, calling it politically motivated and targeted to put an end to Anwar's long involvement in Malaysian politics. The UN Human Rights Office said on Tuesday it was disappointed by the Malaysian federal court ruling upholding Anwar's conviction on sodomy charges. Phil Robertson of Human Rights Watch called the verdict shameful and outrageous and said that it left a stain on human rights in Malaysia. The U.S. Embassy in Kuala Lumpur also released a statement saying that it was deeply disappointed and concerned over the ruling. In its drive to play a bigger role in global security, Japan on Tuesday revised its foreign aid charter. It will now allow funding of non-military operations of other countries' armed forces. The charter stated foreign aid should not be used for military purposes, but added aid for armed forces' non-military operations, like disaster relief, should be allowed. Tokyo has previously extended such aid, but it is the first time such a policy has been explicitly stated in Japan's foreign aid charter. Some, however, did raise concerns that Japan's overseas aid could in fact end up funding foreign military activities. The government says its aid is only for such purposes as post-disaster rescue. Let's say trucks or helicopters were brought under such programs. The problem is, it is impossible to make sure that they are only used for such purposes, said Yoichi Ishii, professor emeritus at Kanagawa University. The best we can do is to make sure intended equipment was purchased. When it comes to how they are used, it is very difficult to draw a clear line between military and non-military applications, he added. A Hong Kong court Tuesday found a local woman guilty of physically abusing her maid in a case that has drawn international attention. However, rights activists question whether it will actually help improve the lives of domestic workers. La Wan Tong, who's 44, will serve time behind bars after being found guilty of 18 out of the 20 charges brought against her, including causing grievous bodily harm with intent, criminal intimidation, and failure to pay wages. During the trial, the court heard how Law punched her maid in the mouth, fracturing her teeth, jammed a metal vacuum cleaner in her mouth, cutting her lip, and forced her to stand naked in a bathroom during winter while she pointed a fan at her. Photos of numerous injuries showed the maid's face, hands, and legs covered with scabs and sores. She was, for want of a better word, a prisoner in those premises, said Judge Amanda Woodcock. In 2013, Amnesty International condemned the slavery-like conditions faced by thousands of domestic staff and accused authorities of inexcusable inaction. It found that Indonesians in particular were exploited by recruitment and placement agencies who seized their documents and charged them with excessive fees with false promises of high salaries and good working conditions. In addition to finding Law guilty, the judge ordered her to pay $3,700 in outstanding wages. Law's sentencing is set for February 27th. Keep up with news from the region by following Asian News Weekly on Facebook and Twitter. You can also send an email to the show with your comments, questions, and feedback. Just drop a note to podcast@asiannewsweekly.net. Subscribe to this and other podcasts at asiannewsweekly.net or in your favorite podcast application like Stitcher or iTunes. Subscribing is free, and when you do, the next episode is delivered automatically to you. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your friends. Thank you so much for listening today. For the Asia Brief, I'm Steve Miller.